Quiet rooms, what you see on the screen there, the right-hand plan, is actually an extract from a school on which we've been advising as a sort of client design advisor. And I just want to show you that the quiet rooms there, which appear in that sketch there as well, are multifunctional. They're partly where you can take a child who's having certain problems and maybe having a little bit of a tantrum or displaying challenging behavior. You can take him in there to calm him down, but you can also use it as a room to take a young person who's maybe having difficulty with their work and needs a one-to-one space in which to communicate closely with his teacher or whatever. So I do urge that anybody here who's involved in schools, and I'm sure you're probably aware already, the need for quiet rooms is very high priority, and they need to be distributed around the school, not just one at one end and one at the other, so you've got 50 yards or 100 yards to walk to get there, because by that time you've got a child on your hands who's out of control, and that's what you don't want. You want to be able to remove them from that classroom almost straight away. Colours. This is a tremendously important issue. We have just completed a research study and program with the University of Kingston, who actually led the research. Professor Dalk, who likes to be credited on these matters quite rightly, headed the research, and it was really to look at colours that work well in an autistic environment. Obviously, we avoid challenging colours like orange and red. We like to go for the more quiet colours. And also another issue, if you look at the picture bottom left, you'll see that the colours there are rather harsh, reflective. It's just what we don't want. It's a very good example of a reflective and hard floor finish there, by the way. So that's a very unfriendly looking space. The picture in the middle refers back to a picture you've probably already seen in an earlier picture, where we've used grey carpet, grey stained ceiling and doors and skirtings and door frames and so on. And that is a quiet, not only quiet acoustically, which I've already talked about, but quiet visually. On the top right, you'll see 6 colours. Now, they're not the only 6 colours, please don't think that. They are simply 6 colours that are 6 of a number, which are deemed to be acceptable to people with ASD. The way the research was handled was that Professor Dalk came into our office and went through a huge number of colour samples with us, asked us to give our opinion of what we thought were the preferred colours. Then she did exactly the same exercise with the staff at 3 different places where we'd worked, where we'd built buildings, and also asked the children which colours they liked, and they had to pick out the ones they wanted. And these 6 here were the sort of top of the choice list, as you might say. And the bottom right photograph you see is a typical bedroom in that small residential building I showed you, where I think there are 4 colours that were chosen from an earlier palette. That was before the research program. And one of them was blue, one of them was a greeny colour, one of them was a sort of purple, and I can't remember what the 4th one was, probably grey. And the children coming into those rooms were given the choice. They could have any one of those colours, and then the room was purposely painted to that choice. So that's how we can try to, give children a participation in the way their room looks. Lighting is probably, well, for me anyhow, is probably the most difficult of all the design issues that we have to try and solve. We don't like the sort of lights you see in the bottom center picture and the bottom right. Those are fluorescent lights, and I'm sure everybody knows that fluorescent lights flicker and are very disturbing to people with ASD. So whatever happens, at all costs, you must avoid fluorescent tube lighting. Compact fluorescents, however, are acceptable, and beyond that, there's a range of other lights that work well. People ring me up sometimes and say they see on our website, things we've said about lighting in articles we've written, and they ring up and ask advice. And I basically say to them, the best thing is to get yourself a good lighting consultant and really make sure that the lights that are chosen are the right sort of lights and give you the right sort of design. The top right photograph you see there illustrates indirect lighting being used, where you don't necessarily see the light source. You might describe that as a sort of pelmet type lighting. We've used that as well, and that is quite successful. But what I would like to say to you is that what we aspire to is to design a building that glows. I hope all the non-English speakers in this room understand the word glow, but please find out what that means. If you don't know G-L-O-W, it means it sort of it has its sense of light without you necessarily seeing where that source of light is. Very, very difficult to do. I don't think we've yet achieved it, but that's what we try to get to. The bottom left photograph I haven't mentioned. That's an okay space, I suppose. You can't see any nasty light fittings, but it's a bit big and a bit unfriendly, so I don't think that's a really terribly good example, but I think the top right picture does illustrate what I'm trying to say. Heating is another very important issue. If you look at the photograph bottom right, that shows you a traditional two-panel radiator, good old cheap and cheerful radiator with exposed pipes all over the place. First of all, your children or adults will pull those pipes off the wall or have a damn good go at it. They'll post papers and anything they can, dirty pants, old socks, teddy bears, everything else behind the radiator. And the staff will forever be digging them out. And then, of course, if they should fall against the radiator, not only will it be hot and they run the risk of burning themselves, but they might carve a lump out of their heads where they hit their heads on the spiky corner of the radiator, all very much to be avoided. What we advocate, well, actually, there is one interim solution which people use, and that's what's called a low surface temperature radiator. So you can touch it, and you can keep your hand on it, and it won't burn you. But because they give out very little heat at a time, you have to have rather a lot of them, and they're rather big and rather bulky and ugly. And so although they work, they're struck out of my list. I don't use them. I would prefer underfloor heating, which you see in the bottom right photograph. Well, it's impossible to take a photograph of underfloor heating because you see nothing. It's under the floor, quite obviously. So the photograph there shows you the underfloor heating in the course of construction. In other words, the pipes under the floor, concrete goes over the top, and then the floor finish, and there's your heating. Another solution is ceiling heating. That's the photograph, both top right and bottom left. It's the same job, actually. And I'm just going to point out to you where the heating is, if you haven't spotted it. That is the radiant heating panel there, and going around there. And people ask me, well, don't you get a very hot head? And I say to them, no, not at all. If it's properly designed, it works brilliantly. When you walk on underfloor heating, do you get hot feet? The answer is no, if it's properly designed. So radiant ceiling panels are excellent. We've had nothing but good reports about that project. And underfloor heating, I think we know works very well as well. Only one disadvantage with that is that it does have a fairly slow response time, which is not the case with the radiant ceiling panels. Oh, sorry, wrong one.
Sorry, you have a minute. You have a minute, please.
1 minute, okay. Curtains and blinds. We would not have blinds, as you see in the right-hand picture. They're just hung on the inside. They get damaged, as you can see there. We put them in between the double glazing. It looks like the picture in the middle, very neat and tidy, quite expensive because you have to use remote control, but they are very successful and work well. Security, I'm going to skip over fairly quickly. I prefer to use magnetic locks on any doors where there are children on the other side, because they get released when the fire alarm is pressed, and you don't run the risk of anybody, child or adult, being locked inside in a sudden emergency. Door closers, those sort on the bottom right don't work because you can swing on them, get your fingers caught in the mechanism there. We go for the type that are recessed in the door with a single arm, and you only see the arm when it's don't know why that's jumping. Okay, well.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but this is... Not going to the next one. Oh, there it is, rather slow. Can I just go on for one more minute? No?
We
okay.
are through. Thank you.
I'll stop there. Thank you very much.